Zero Sum is a book about one of the greatest experiments in global capitalism, and that is essentially the last 3 decades of Western business in Russia. Russia opened up as a market following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991-92, and Western business absolutely stampeded into Russia. This was a time when the world was globalizing, business was globalizing, Russia was labeled a sort of high-growth emerging market, and everything sort of smelled of opportunity in Russia in the early 90s. And then, you have this arc in the late 1990s and in the 2000s more particularly, you had phenomenal growth. I mean, real boom years with the price of oil rising and the resource supercycle that brought everyone into Russia. And really, it was a time of plant any seed and it would grow kind of investment period. And then, of course, you have the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And there was an almost equal stampede in reverse of Western companies leaving Russia. And Russia is now the most sanctioned country in the world, more than Iran, more than North Korea. And doing business there, of course, is now extremely difficult. Yeah, I think there are 2 very important takeaways about doing business, not just in Russia, but doing business globally. And that's 2 things. And the first one is that when it came to Russia and other places like China, India, Brazil, the famous BRIC countries, companies tended to look at countries as markets rather than as political and geopolitical entities as well. And they overlooked what was going on politically inside the places that they wanted to do business. And so I think going forward, companies can't forget that in addition to being a place to buy things or sell things or make things, countries are political animals, and sometimes those animals can bite very, very hard. The other thing that I think we've learned in Russia and have to apply globally is that we make a set of assumptions about a place when we start to invest there. And what companies didn't do in Russia is they didn't challenge those assumptions robustly enough or frequently enough. And, they kind of did their market entry and then just kept going. And the situation in Russia, as it is everywhere else in the world, is changing on the ground. And companies have to reassess, and they have to do that regularly. And they hadn't been doing that in Russia. And by the time they sort of were looking around and thinking, gee, everything's changed here, it was too late. What's going to happen next in Ukraine is essentially what's already happening there now. We've had a series of false starts in peace negotiations, and American intervention and EU intervention hasn't done anything to bring the 2 sides together, and they remain oceans apart in their approach on how to bring this conflict to an end. President Putin is determined to crush Ukraine as a sovereign nation and really gives no indication that he's ready to diverge from that path at all. There are questions about whether he has the economic power to do this, whether he has the ongoing military strength to do this. Those questions don't seem to be worrying him very much. The questions on the other side are how long can the United States and how long can Europe support Ukraine? Those are valid questions, and the situation right now is in a state of tremendous flux about the longevity of U.S. in particular commitments to Ukraine. But genuinely, for the foreseeable future, there's nothing but more of the same coming at us. So the theme of the conference that we're at is Another World is Possible. And this is a really important reminder to all of us that it's a cliche, but it's true, and that is that the flip side of risk is opportunity. And companies, organizations that can embrace risk and that can manage risk gain enormous competitive advantage over companies that aren't quite as good as navigating this period of profound and deep disruption. So that companies that have the internal infrastructure, the sort of managerial attitude, a bit of a strong stomach, a bit of an iron gut, companies that embrace risk are the ones that actually will generate opportunities for themselves in places where other companies only see danger.